Ur of the Chaldees, also known as Babylon. But we're also taught that he was 48 years old back in chapter 11 when the Tower of Babel encounter took place. And so 48 from 75 would have been 27 years up until the time that Abraham left. Now, the number 27 is extremely important because it is also the numerical value of Strong's number 3518. That word is kabah, and it's a word that means to put it out, to quench, as a fire that's being extinguished or a source of a line of descendants being cut off. Now, wait just a second. Ur of the Chaldees is a place where there's a flame that's lighting up a false generation. Sounds to me sort of like Abraham may have been natured a little bit like Elijah. See, Elijah was one of those individuals that when he contested the prophets of Baal and the prophets of the grove, he took them down to the river. Hello, and he mikvahed them. Are you with me? He mikvahed them. He took the heads of the enemies off. Now, if you read this, it's telling you that Abraham was responsible for extinguishing that pagan fire that was encountered there in Ur of the Chaldees. Now, kabah is also closely related to 35:19. That word is kavod, which is the word for glory and majesty, something that's weighty and heavy. And as you continue to look at that, you'll see that it has something to do with the glorious presence of Yahweh that enabled Abraham to work to extinguish the strange fire that was being offered through these mystical pagan religions. Well, isn't that what you've been called to do? If he is the menorah, he is the shamash candle, he is the center one, the center flame that lights all these other flames. Aren't you part of the flame, the candle of Yahweh? And if you're releasing that word, the light of Yahweh that will put out the counterfeit light, then you're part and parcel of extinguishing the flame of the enemies of Yahweh. Did you hear what I just said? You can't be timid and weak-kneed in this business. Or Hasatan, the enemy, Satan, turn to your neighbor and tell him he'll kill you. He will kill you deader than graveyard dead. He'll affect where you spend eternity if you're timid and weak. You'd better get a backbone that's a little stiffer than a water hose. How many of y'all ever seen a water hose when you put pressure to it? It'll do just like that. That's the way most believers are. Put a little pressure. As long as everything's going fine, we're like this. Put the pressure on them and we'll flop just like a water hose. Amen. Now, if you continue to read, Abraham was called first Hebrew after his ancestor known as Eber, which was the 14th generation from Adam. And I wanted to look at that word Eber. Of course, it means one that's crossed over, one who stood in opposition. And if you read that, you'll find that's in chapter 10, right before chapter 11. And so it's evident he was also contemporary with this Nimrod, the marauder, the rebellious one. And so he would have been standing in opposition, as was Shem and also later Abraham. Are you following? Now, 14 is written by the number Aleph Dalet. Aleph is the strong one, Dalet's the door. And so if you're going to become a Hebrew, then you're going to have to deal with that strong one who's standing at the door. The Ed, the witness. That word Ed, Strong's number 108, I almost say 108, is mist and vapor. If you said as much as I have in the last hour, your tang would be tangled. Ed is mist and vapor. Genesis chapter 2, verse 6. That word Ed is from Strong's number 181, and that word is ood, a firebrand, a fire, something that is faintly burning. So Eber then was a prophetic promise of Yahweh to produce a firebrand among those that were about to die out. Remember, right up there you just read, a fire is being extinguished. And so Yahweh's telling you unequivocally, I'm cutting off the generation that's in Ur of the Chaldees. That's what Yahweh's telling Abraham. I'm going to cut off those that's in Babylon. It's Lech Lecha. It's for your benefit that you leave, because I'm going to extinguish this generation. That's what is going to happen. Did you hear what I just said? Now, if that's the truth, then the firebrand would have been Abraham, and through Abraham, Messiah, through Messiah, you. You are a flaming fire. You're an Ish, a man, also an Ish, a fire man, a man who is on fire, or a woe man who is on fire. Are you with me? So firebrand and water both are connected with the Messiah. He was both the brand plucked from the fire and the living water. And as we were reading last night, there was a fiery mist in Genesis chapter 2, verse 6 that watered the garden prior to the man being put in the garden to work it. After man was put in the garden to work it, it began to rain. There's a connection here. The Torah was the mist until the rain came. The rain is the Torah. I mean, the mist is the Torah. Messiah is the rain, the living water that flowed without restraint. He was the well of living water, and out of your belly should flow that living spring of water. Now, one lineage is alive, the other lineage is dying out. And you have to ask yourself again, who's dying out? And we just covered that. It was that group that was ensconced in the pagan traditions that were in a rebellious position against Yahweh. And let me just clarify something. Some people are there out of ignorance and don't know any better, and as they're hearing what you're hearing, people that have a heart that's leaning toward Yahweh will come out. Revelation 18:4 says, come out of her, my people. Notice the terminology. He didn't say, come out of her, heathen. He didn't say, come out of her, goyim or Gentile. He says, come out of her, my people. It's inferring that he knows that there's a remnant in there. Now he says, if you don't come out, then I will visit her with some plagues, and because you're there by association, you'll become a partaker of those plagues. Do y'all follow me? So it's Lech Lecha. It's for your benefit that you go out. Now, as I said, Genesis 14:1 defines Abraham as the first Hebrew. His forefather was Eber. Now, I want to look in Genesis 11:18 through 24. I want to look at this individual, Eber, and I want to look at his son's name, Peleg, Joktan, Reu, and Serug. Peleg, 6389, means division, split, to be divided. Sounds like some of the denominations today, don't it? Oh, did you hear about so-and-so church? They split. They had a division over there. Well, Peleg was in the house, right? Well, if you go back and look, it says in Genesis 10:25, in his day the earth was divided. I believe that the earth was literally divided in his day. And I believe if you go back and look, you'd probably see that the continents would fit together if it hadn't been for that division. But I also believe that it was talking about a division along the lines of spiritual relationship with Yahweh. This man stood in opposition, and it caused division. And if you're staying in a place that's cold and dead and there's not much word and you're trying to serve Yahweh, you're going to cause strife and division. You need to just come out. You got quiet in there. Hello? Are you listening? His name literally means divider. I like that. I like being called a divider. You know why? Because wherever I go, I will make a distinction between who's on Yahweh's side and who is not. Let's look at the name Joktan. Strong's number 3355 means small, to be diminished. Ru, 7466. Rehu means friend, from Ra'ah, shepherd. Seru, Strong's number 8286, branch, to be intertwined with. Listen to this. The division that diminished produced a remnant, revealing the shepherd Messiah, a branch who would be intertwining and uniting his people. Amen. Abraham was the 20th generation from Adam. 20 is the gematria of 1961, the word chaya, which means to exist. And it's also where you get the letter He from, because when Yahweh changed his name from Abram to Abraham, he takes the letter He and puts in there, Abraham. And the He represented the chaya, and he's reminding Abraham, I am that I am. I will be that I will be. I came, I come to pass, it has been done, This was a generation in which the promise of Yahweh to Abraham was to deliver him from Babylon, and that it would occur. And in the same manner, you and I are going to see it happen in our day. He is the Chayah. When you and I enter into a covenant relationship with him, he's going to place the Chayah in your name. Amen. 20 is a number represented by the letter Kaf, which depicts the palm of the hand or the sole of the foot. Back to what we were talking about earlier in Lech Lecha, the Lamed and the Kaf. So if you look at the fact that Abraham, being the 20th generation, it reminds us, since Yahweh said that he has graven us in the palm of his hand, Isaiah 49:16, it reminds us of the promise of Yahweh to keep the inscription. What has been inscribed? Remember, we were talking about something that's been etched, inscribed, something that's being recounted and related, something that you're told to retell. Well, the inscription has to do with the language of Yahweh. You can't, if you don't have a language, you can't recount it. You can't retell it. Well, the Hebrew language is the only language that can tell you properly what's written in the stellar heavens. If you don't think so, go and look at some of the Greek names and some of the Arabic names that's stuck on some of them, and it's intentionally done that way to compromise the message. But even with that, there's still enough residual Hebrew names that it can convey the general message of redemption from the creation to the inception or culmination of the age. Can you say amen? Praise Yahweh. Now, Abraham is a unique foreshadow. Not only was he the father of the Hebrews, but he became the father of faith. Thus, by his leaving Babylon and his journey to Canaan, it pictures the whole house of Jacob and includes the house of faith. Those that are not able to consider themselves part of the house of Israel, and a lot of the church folks do, but they will consider themselves the house of faith. Well, by faith, Abraham. By faith, Isaac. By faith, Sarah. By faith, David. By faith, Elijah. By faith, you. If you expect to be part of the house of Yahweh, it will be the same way Abraham did, by faith. Now, what I was sharing with you earlier was reminding us that these names have a very powerful message for us. It's reminding us that we're going to cross over only to the extent that we're willing to stand in opposition to the rebellious one, the Nimrod that's coming. The anti-Messiah who's on his way. He's here already. He has just not been made visible as of yet. We can surmise thus far that Abraham was entrusted with the holy language, the DNA of Yahweh, shown in Proverbs 20:27, because at age 48, while the rest of the language was confounded, Shem, the name, the place where Yahweh dwelled, had the word, the language, and it was passed down to Hebrew, to Abraham. And since that day, there has been a remnant that has protected the pure language of Yahweh. And that's the reason. It's not an accident. That's why you have a hunger in your heart to learn the Hebrew language. It's the language that Zephaniah 3:8 and 9 talks about, that pure language. It is the language of those who are crossing over. It's the language of those who will stand in opposition against. It's the code that is going to be broken open so that you can have privy information about what your enemy is about in the days ahead. Proverbs 20:27 says, the spirit of man is a candle. The 52:16, the near, as in the near Elohim, the furnace, the light of Yahweh. The same furnace that walked through the sacrifices in Genesis 15:17. Abraham was anointed as high priest in the place of Shem, also known as Melchizedek. And if you go back to look at it, we're taught that by the rabbis that he transferred the mantle to Abraham. And from Abraham, it was passed on down to Elijah to Yochanan, the immerser. And they believe to this day that when the Messiah appears on the scene, that Elijah, we talked about him in Malachi chapter 4, that Elijah will have that mantle of Adam and will place it on the shoulders of the Messiah. They don't understand that he has already come and he already has that mantle on him now. Amen. Yeah. Yahweh inserted the letter Hey in Abraham's name, and he'll do that for you. It's only when we are willing to leave Babylon, when he says, Lech Lecha. It's for your best interest that you leave that place. Hope you've enjoyed this teaching.